Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is Saturday, August 26, 2023. We're actually going to get the video out on time today. Last couple of days have been busy between work and just life in general. So had a little break in the action here. So we'll take a few minutes and talk about a couple of events and talk about some birthdays. Being the time of the year that it is, this is generally for many, many years when the Bristol night race was going on. So we're going to go back to 1989. Darrell Waltrip won what would be his next to last race at Bristol in the 1989 Busch 500. Probably a couple big events that went relatively unnoticed. One, Richard Petty did not qualify for this race, which obviously everyone noticed. But this would be the final D&Q of Richard's career. He had four in 1989. I think he had a few way back in the early part of his career, like when he crashed out at Daytona during the qualifying race and didn't make it. But 1989 was a rough season for Richard Petty and his team. He had 4 D&Qs at Richmond, Bristol, Wilkesboro, and Bristol again. So he did not make either race in Bristol that year. But this would be the final D&Q of Richard's career. And another car that was entered, number one car for Tommy Ellis, looked and seen that it was owned by the Wood brothers. And I remember on ESPN them talking about that this was a car for the movie Days of Thunder. They didn't say Days of Thunder because I don't think it had a title, but they said that the car was entered for an upcoming racing movie. And there was some footage. I can't remember. There's a couple cars I think that had some cameras in them that footage was used in the Days of Thunder. So this was really the first big acknowledgement about the Days of Thunder movie that would be released the following year. 1995 on this date, Terry Labonte won at Bristol. A few big things happened in this race. Number one, obviously, the round one of Terry Labonte, Dale Earnhardt, when Dale bumped him coming off of 4. Terry slid across the line sideways, hit the inside wall, and won the race. There was a huge rain delay at the beginning of the race. If you go back and look for some, I've got some original footage somewhere on tape that I need to get uploaded. But they actually had the fans doing a wave all the way around the track, and they actually started keeping lap counts of it. And it got up to like 18 or 20 laps before it just kind of dissipated. And then Joe Nemechek's team, the number 87 car, had what the NASCAR teams called scuba gear. They had these backpacks for their air guns. So when they changed tires, there was no air guns that they had to, or hoses that they had to mess with. And then NASCAR told them, don't bring the scuba gear back again. So it's pretty funny to watch the teams changing tires, and they didn't have any hoses going across. So actually, it's a pretty ingenuitive idea at the time, but NASCAR said no. And then 1 year ago today, Jeremy Clements won the Xfinity Series race at Daytona. To date, that was his final career win. Of course, hopefully maybe he'll win some more. But also, strangely enough, right now, it's been his most recent top 10 finish. So Jeremy's been on a bit of a bad luck streak, so hopefully he gets that turned around. So we got some birthdays to talk about real quickly. Born on this day in 1946, sadly passed away in 1973, Swede Savage. And a lot of you may not know the name, but he was kind of a USAC racer, raced some NASCAR back in the 60s here and there, but was involved in a very, very brutal single-car accident in that horrible race in 1973 that many people that were there probably wish they could forget. It had it was delayed by rain and postponed and moved, and opening lap crash with Salt Walther, and he had some injuries, and some members of the crowd were injured by flying debris. Then Swede Savage's crash happened later in the race, and then there was a pit crew member of a team killed by a safety truck going up the pit road the wrong direction. So just a horrible, horrible race that day, or that year, because it was, I think it was over a few day period. Born on this date, excuse me, in 1944, another former Indy 500 regular, Mr. Johnny Parsons. So we do have a couple of the older A&S racing cards here, so part of the Canadian Tire team, and then Pizza Hut. Didn't see them on cars very often. I'm trying to see what that patch has. Machinist Union Racing Team. So he was kind of a journeyman driver, just picked up rides whenever he could. And then we have another longtime campaigner in NASCAR circles, born on this day in 1934, sadly passed away in a traffic accident after coming from a race in 2018. He is a longtime Cup Series driver and ARCA Series driver, Mr. James Hylton. He was 1966 Cup Series Rookie of the Year. He had a few top 10 finishes in points over the years. There you see the car that he drove. I believe it was owned by Bud Hartgee. There you see it right there. He'd later become his own car owner well into the 80s, 1980s that is. Well, his 80s as well. But the 1980s, then he started kind of becoming a renter racer, renting out to different drivers. Trevor Boyes and Ronnie Thomas and so many others would rent his car, have some good runs in it. And then in the early 90s, he did pick up the Rumpel Furniture sponsorship briefly. There you see it after J.D. McDuffie passed. Had that for a couple years, running part-time. Then he eventually just went to the ARCA series, probably just more cost-effective for what he wanted to do, because he could at least get into the races, and because most of the Cup Series stuff near the end of his career, he wasn't able to qualify. And our final, we do have another birthday here, born on this date in 1963. Former open-wheel driver, did make a brief foray into the NASCAR world. I'm not sure if he went back to sports cars or what he did. Mr. Anthony Lazzaro. Of course, that was a brief splash back in 2000. And then our final birthday, I'm sure this guy will eventually be in the Hall of Fame, but he's a championship-winning crew chief, former car owner, and currently he has worked recently with the SRX series. If you guessed, and he used to race modifieds as well. If you guessed Ray Evernham, you guessed correctly. Now, these are in no particular order, but he did work with the IROC series as well. But he's a modified racer, had some injuries. He went to work with Jay Signori, the IROC series. I believe Rick Hendrick noticed him, said, hey, come head up this team. I got this hotshot kid going to be driving my car. When you know it, him and Gordon made a really, really good pairing. And what was it, 1999, he stepped down, and they put Brian Weitzel as his replacement for a little bit, and then Robbie Loomis came on board. But Ray went over to own Evernham Motorsports, the 9 and 19 cars of then Casey Atwood and Bill Elliott. And then Casey got released. They put Mayfield in. Of course, then that whole fiasco. Casey Kane started driving. And then they bought Richard Petty Motorsports, and George Gillette came in. It was just, yeah. So Ray's probably happy that he doesn't have a regular diet of Maalox and Tums anymore. But he was a definitely good wrench. Definitely good strategist, made a lot of good calls, won a lot of races, won a lot of championships. So I see him getting in the Hall of Fame eventually. And I know that the way that the NASCAR Hall of Fame is structured, you know, like this year, we knew who two of the ballots, of the three modern-day ballots, we knew who two of them were going to be. We knew, hands down. There was no question. So I think eventually Ray will get in. He has, in my worldview, earned his way in with all his accomplishments as not only a crew chief, but a car owner, even though his car owner stats are nowhere near what his crew chief stats were. But nonetheless, happy birthday each and every one of these folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you come back tomorrow. We'll probably rip something. Not sure what we're going to get into yet, but we will have something for you. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.